For the sewn in arms, legs, and head, you have two torsos to choose from. The one on the left has the sewn in head, and the one on the right has the doll jointed head with sewn in legs and arms. The first thing we need to do is load the back and butt file from your back folder for the size of doll you are stitching and stitch the die line on a piece of stabilizer. We'll cut two pieces of doll fabric the length of the die line and about 5 to 6 inches wide, and we'll also cut two pieces of fleece fabric the same size. The stretch should be perpendicular to the grain line, which I'm showing here. The grain goes with the die line, so the stretch of your fabric needs to go the opposite way or perpendicular. You should have two pieces of fleece and two pieces of doll jersey. And we will arrange them with a piece of fleece on the bottom, then two layers of the doll jersey, and then another piece of fleece on top of all that so that the doll jersey fabric is sandwiched in between two pieces of fleece. Stitch the tack down line for the back and butt file, and you'll notice that there'll be a gap left where the curvature of the butt ends. And so we're just going to trim this area and leave a 1/2 inch tab of fabric where that gap is. And this is for turning the doll later on and being able to stitch it closed. And you're just going to cut close to the tack down line here, just as I'm doing. Stitch the die line for the torso file you've selected. If you're making a lot of dolls, you can use a scrap of stabilizer and cut it to fit your torso die line and then just label it for the size of doll you're making. And that way you can use it for future reference and save on wasting of your fabric. Cut one piece of fleece and one piece of doll jersey the size of your torso and lay it over the torso die line, fleece first, then doll skin jersey with the stretch perpendicular to the grain line. Now we'll stitch the tack down for our torso. Stitch the support circle for the head as well as the belly button. Also stitch the die line for the placement for your arms and legs. Arms will stitch first. If you're going to be sewing your head into the body, you're going to use this torso shaped file, and your neck will stitch after the first arm die line, and it'll look like this. This is the sewn into body head torso file, and you'll see the neck die line stitch after the first arm. However, if you're not going to be sewing your head to the body and you're just sewing the arms and legs, you're not going to have that die line stitch, and it's just going to move to the next arm like it is here. After that, it'll stitch two die lines at the bottom of the torso, and those are for the left and right legs. If you're stitching the head into the torso, you're going to do this step first, and what you'll do is you'll take your head that you made that's special to creating a sewn-in head. It's not just the normal head. You'll have to find the sewn-in head version in your files, and you'll place it face down with the neck overhanging the die line, and you want to get it as close as you can get it to that die line. Like here I left in half an inch, but really it should be closer, and you just want to make sure that the chin isn't in the way and that you've tucked it out of the way so it doesn't get stitched, and you just want to tape that. If you are making your head attached with a doll joint, you won't do this step. Again, for the sewn-in head version, you'll attach the head first with a die line, and if you are attaching your head with a doll joint, this step will not be in your torso. If you are attaching your head with a plastic doll joint, then you'll have this circle at the top of your torso, just like this. First, we'll place our arms over the die lines. Have your arms left and rights together, thumbs pointed towards the sky, magnets together, elbows on the underside, and the seams for stuffing on the underside. And you're going to take one of your arms and you are going to look at it, and you'll see it has the nicer stitching, not the bobbin side, and you're going to flip it over and line it on the die line for the arms, but you're going to leave a 1/4 of an inch distance between that top stitching on the arm and the die line on the torso where the arm is attached, and that will give you the flappiness that you need to have movement in your arms. So you don't want to put that line directly on the die line. You want to have it a 1/4 of an inch away, and then just tape that arm in place, and you should be able to now see the stuffing openings on the top side of the arm. You should be able to locate those right there. So you should be looking at that side of the arm, and then just tape the other arm just as you did this one. Here I'm just making sure once again my arms are left and right, and I flip it over, and I'm leaving the top stitching on the arm 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch away from the die line, and I'm taping it in place. And then back at the machine we'll stitch the tack down for the left arm first, then the right arm. And again, if you are attaching your head in the hoop, it would be underneath these arms. It would already have been attached to the torso. Here I'm taking my legs, making sure that they're left and they're right. Knees will be pointed out. The stuffing openings will be on the inside. So the openings for stuffing will be facing each other, knees pointed out, and then you'll just flip the leg up. Do the right leg first, and you'll see that stitching on the top of the thigh is the bobbin side. So I'm just going to tape it so that it's a 1/4 of an inch. That line on the thigh is a 1/4 of an inch away from the die line on the torso. And here's another view of me doing this. I'm just taking the right leg and I'm flipping it over. You'll see the bobbin side, and I'm just lining it up on the die line a 1/4 of an inch away from the die line so that there's some space in between that line on the thigh and the die line on the torso. The knee should, you should notice that my knee is pointed to the outside of the body and the toes are pointed up, and I'm just going to stitch the tack down for the right leg. Here with the left leg, the same thing. The seams for stuffing will be on the inside and the knees will be pointed to the outside, and you'll just flip it over with the bobbin side of the stitching on the thigh at the top will be a 1/4 of an inch away from your die line for your leg on the torso, and there needs to be a 1/4 of an inch space. Here's another angle here showing me taping it, and just notice the position of my knees and my toes, and I'm just making sure I have that 1/4 of an inch between the stitching at the top of the thigh and where the die line will stitch again to secure the leg, and I just tape it really well. Now back at the machine, we'll just stitch the tack down line for the last leg, which will be the left leg, and it'll stitch twice just like the other arms and the other leg to really make sure that those legs are secure. Now that the legs and arms are attached, and if you're doing the head, that will be attached already too. Now we just want to arrange our legs and arms so that they're as flat as possible and that they won't cross over that die line for the torso. We don't want them to get stitched into the side of the body or anything like that. So I'm just kind of squishing them all up, and I'm going to tape them in place really well. And if you're doing your head also, it'll be under the arms and it'll be attached as well. So just tape everything really well. After we tape those well, we're going to take our back panel, the back and butt that we made with the curvature for the butt, and you can either pin it over top of your torso, lining up center lines at the neck and the crotch, or you can use hot glue like I'm doing here. I use hot glue because it allows me to make sure I'm getting everything as flat and smooth as possible, but if you're not comfortable doing that, feel free to use pins or embroidery tape, which might be stronger than Scotch tape. And what I'm doing here is I am actually hot gluing down first the flesh color layer because everything's kind of loose. And it's much easier to get everything centered if you actually start at the butt. Because you have that curvature and you want to make sure that you're lining up the straight part that was stitched at the bottom where the butt is to the torso. After you secure the top and the bottom part, you can work your way around each side with the flesh layer, working with a flesh layer of fabric only, and just pulling it and hot gluing, pinning, or taping it well far away from that die line. Even though I'm using hot glue, there's no danger of the pressure foot or the needle striking the dried glue because it's at least an inch away. And I like hot glue because it dries really fast and it holds the fabric very well. And I'm just hot gluing only to the stabilizer. And so that allows me to get this layer of fabric nice and taut over the torso. Once I get the left side done, I'm just going to work on the right side and repeat what I did over there, applying hot glue around an inch, at least an inch away, and just pulling the flesh layer of fabric and sticking it to the stabilizer so that it stays where it needs to be. After I have hot glued down the flesh layer fabric, I'm going to go directly over the same area again with more hot glue, and I'm going to stick the fleece layer to the doll jersey. That way everything is smooth and flat and nice and tight. So just using more hot glue there and pulling on that fleece layer and sticking it to the hoop. Here I am switching over to the left side, applying more hot glue and securing the loose fleece layer to the hoop. To keep everything tidy, I just trim around the hot glue as close as I can to get rid of any excess fabric so that there's nothing to get caught on any pressure feet moving across the hoop, and I just tape down any loose bits like the bum and the opening in the back. I tuck those flaps in, and I even tape at the bottom and the top of the torso where there's a seam so that the pressure foot will glide over. And here everything is trimmed and taped down or glued down, pinned down, whatever you prefer, and it's ready to be stitched. Before you start stitching, if you have a low pressure foot on your machine, you can advance your machine to the first stitch of this layer or this color that does the tack down line for your torso, so that your machine isn't traveling over the center thickness section of this torso. So before you even put your machine in the hoop, you can advance your needle to the first position where it will actually start stitching, and that way you don't have to worry about the pressure foot traveling over the bumpy part of the torso. And this line will stitch twice to secure everything very well. The arms and the legs really need to be stitched well, so that's why I have that double layer of stitching, and it'll go around twice. This is what it looks like, and when it's done you can just trim close to the tack down line all the way around the whole torso. Remove the stabilizer from your torso. If you're making a willow fairy and you want the wings to attach magnetically, then you would tape a magnet with Dr. Scholl's medical adhesive to the torso right above where the opening for the turning and stuffing of the torso is. This is the doll jointed version of the torso, but I just thought I would attach that picture here so you could see where to put the magnet. And then once you're done, you would just turn your torso inside out. Reach inside the torso and grab each arm and pull it through the opening, and then grab each leg, pull it through the opening, and that will help you to turn the torso easier. After this step, if you haven't attached your head or sewn your head into the body and you're just sewing the arms and legs in, once you turn your torso right side out, you're going to be finished. But I'm going to actually talk a little bit about if you have attached your head to the torso by sewing it into the hoop. And so what I'm doing here is I'm taking a piece of upholstery thread, doubled it over and knotted it, and I have taken a stitch under the chin, and I'm just going to pass my needle through the loop and create a knot. And I'm going to use a ladder stitch to pull the head closer to the body so that it's a little bit more stable. So what I'm doing is I'm coming across directly from that knot, about the same distance away from the center seam, and I'm taking a stitch and I'm just going to create a ladder stitch to pull the neck and the head down closer to the chest. If you're using the version of the torso that has the circle at the neck, you're not going to do this step because your head will be attached with a plastic doll joint. But if you are sewing your head in, then you will want to do this step just to add a little bit more security to make sure that your head is not so floppy and doesn't fall backwards too easily. This will help it to make it not so floppy. So this ladder stitch, you're just going to go all the way across, right on the, it's actually on the back side of the head, and you're just pulling the back side of the head down to the chest as I'm doing here. There's a separate video apart from the ears and head video that everyone else is using. If you're doing your sewn in head, there'll be a separate video to create your sewn in head so that it has the neck flap that you'll be attaching. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you go find that video and watch it. But you can see the ladder stitch when you pull it, how it pulls the head close to the chest. And then once you get to the end, you're going to turn around and go all the way back the other way to do a second row of ladder stitching to pull the head even more secure. And the smaller stitches you take, the better. Here I'm using large stitches, but I really should have used really small ladder stitches. So the smaller you make your ladder stitches, the cleaner this is going to look, and you don't want to pull it too tight. You want it just to be tight enough to hold, because if you do pull it too tight, you might have some rippling and stuff like I do here. And I'm doing this with a partially stuffed head and partially stuffed torso. You can do this before you stuff the torso, or you can fully stuff it and then do the ladder stitching, so that you can see how the head lies and what it needs, how much stitching you need to put here. But it's just a simple ladder stitch that goes all the way across and then all the way back, and then when we're finished, we'll knot off and hide the tails. Here I've come all the way back to where I began, so I'm just going to create a knot with a double loop and just passing my needle through twice, pulling the thread, and then I'm going to take those threads and I'm going to hide them inside the body. This is a great option for those who don't have access to doll joints or just don't like using them, and it creates a very floppy and posable baby. Up next, we're going to finish our babies and put wigs on our babies, so stay tuned.